A street candy vendor rescued a puppy, not knowing it belonged to a billionaire tech inventor, and he unexpectedly fell in love. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? Now, enjoy the story. Sophie was selling candy at a traffic light when she heard the screech of tires, followed by a loud thud and a desperate yelp. Her heart jumped. She turned and saw a small puppy lying in the street, trembling in pain, tiny paws twitching, eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, she rushed into the road, knelt beside him, and cradled him in her arms as if saving something more valuable than her own life. "It's okay, I've got you now," she whispered, her voice trembling as tears blurred her vision. The puppy's tiny body quivered like fragile paper. People stared. Some mumbled something about calling for help, but no one moved. Sophie didn't hesitate. She pressed the pup gently against her chest and started running. At the nearby vet clinic, the receptionist hesitated when she saw Sophie, her worn jacket, dusty shoes, and tangled hair. The air of the street clung to her. "He needs help, please," Sophie said urgently. The vet emerged quickly and examined the dog. "His leg is dislocated. We'll need to stabilize him and manage the pain. It's serious, but he'll recover." The receptionist returned with a printed quote. "It's $100, everything included." Sophie nodded slowly. Then she dug deep into her old backpack and pulled out a crushed box held together with tape. It held every dollar she'd saved from months of selling candy at intersections. "This is all I have," she said, placing the money on the counter with trembling hands. "But I'll pay." The receptionist counted the bills, surprised. "It's exactly right. Do you want a receipt?" Sophie gave a small smile. "If I needed a receipt, I'd have a mailing address." She sat on a plastic chair and waited, her stomach growling with hunger, but she didn't care. She'd done the right thing. Sophie stood on the corner of the busy intersection, clutching a small box of homemade candy. She had been out since sunrise trying to sell enough to afford a warm meal. That's when she heard it, the sharp screech of tires, a thud, and a painful, high-pitched whimper. Her heart dropped. She turned and spotted a small puppy lying on the road, trembling, eyes wide in terror. Without thinking, Sophie dashed into traffic, knelt down beside the little creature and scooped him into her arms like he was the most precious thing in the world. "It's okay, I've got you," she whispered, her voice shaking as tears blurred her vision. People nearby stopped and stared, murmuring about calling for help. But no one moved, no one did anything, except her. Sophie held the injured puppy close to her chest and ran. At the nearest vet clinic, the receptionist hesitated. Sophie looked out of place, her jacket worn, shoes thin, and the scent of city streets clinging to her. Still, she raised her voice. "Please, he needs help." The veterinarian rushed over. "His leg is dislocated. We need to stabilize it and manage the pain. He'll be okay, but it's serious." Then came the bill, $100. Sophie stood quietly for a moment, then reached into her backpack. From it she pulled out a small taped-up box filled with the crumpled bills and coins she had painstakingly saved by selling candy for months. "This is everything I have," she said softly, placing the money on the counter with trembling fingers. The receptionist counted, surprised. "It's exactly the amount. Would you like a receipt?" Sophie gave a tired smile. "If I needed a receipt, I'd have an address." She sank into a plastic chair and waited. Her stomach growled from hunger, but she didn't care. She had done the right thing. Later, the vet returned with the puppy, now bandaged, legs stabilized, and a protective collar around his neck. "He'll recover," the vet said kindly. "Just needs rest and care for a few days. By the way, he has a tag with a name and address. Max, 515 Crestwood Lane." Sophie's chest tightened. She knew that a street, lined with gates, trimmed hedges, and houses that looked more like mansions. Still, she lifted the sleeping puppy into her arms and began to walk. 515. Crestwood Lane looked like something out of a movie. A towering gate, trimmed gardens, security cameras at every corner. Sophie, standing there in her tattered jeans and second-hand backpack, felt like a ghost. She pressed the intercom. "Hi. I found a dog. His name's Max. He was hurt. I took him to a vet. This address was on his tag." The gate opened. Sophie walked through the open gate, heart pounding. A staff member in a crisp uniform greeted her and silently led her through a gleaming white corridor that seemed to glow with luxury. Every step echoed against marble floors. When the office door opened, she was greeted by a man standing near a window, dressed in a dark tailored jacket. He didn't look like what she expected, not a businessman flaunting wealth, but someone tired, reserved, worn in a way only loneliness could cause. The moment his eyes landed on the dog in Sophie's arms, they filled with raw emotion. "Max," he breathed, stepping forward. "I've been searching for him everywhere. I thought he didn't make it." He took the pup gently. Max whimpered at first, but when he recognized the man, his tail wagged hard and fast. The man looked at Sophie, disbelief washing over his features. Where did you find him?" She told him everything, the accident, the clinic, how she used her savings. "You paid for all of it?" he asked, stunned. She nodded. "It was all I had. I sell candy by the highway. I used what I'd saved." "But why? Why would you do that for a stranger's dog?" Sophie looked away for a moment, her voice trembling. "Because nobody else did anything. He was scared. I know what that feels like." Silence filled the space. The man turned, opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. "Here, for what you spent, and more." Sophie raised a hand and stepped back. "I don't want your money. I just wanted to make sure he was safe." He hesitated. "Then, where do you stay?" She hesitated too, but something about him felt safe enough to be honest. "Near 8th Avenue, in an alley behind a laundromat." He blinked, stunned. "You live on the streets?" She nodded once. "I have a guest room. It's nothing extravagant, just a bed, a lock on the door, a shower. You could stay, at least until Max fully recovers." Sophie's eyes widened. "You want me to stay here?" He nodded. "Just while he heals. I trust you. So does he." Sophie looked at Max, who had already curled up in the man's arms, eyes half closed in safety. Then she looked at the envelope on the table. Her stomach growled again, but she ignored it. "No one's ever offered me anything like that before," she whispered. The man softened. "It's not charity. It's gratitude. For both of us." Sophie bit her lip, then said quietly, "If I stay, it's only for Max." "Of course, he replied. "For Max." But deep down, they both knew this was the beginning of something far more unexpected than either of them could have imagined. Sophie woke up before dawn. She still wasn't used to the softness of the mattress or the silence of the room. The sheets were fresh. The air was warm. But her instincts, sharpened by years of survival, wouldn't let her rest completely. She slipped out of bed, tied her hair with the elastic she found in her bag, and tiptoed toward the kitchen. The house was so quiet it almost felt like a museum. She whispered to herself, "No standing around doing nothing," and began to move through the kitchen, opening drawers and cabinets. She found a coffee maker, a loaf of bread, eggs. She figured she could try making breakfast, even if she didn't really know how. It felt like the right thing to do. Give something back. She turned the stove knob and was just starting to pour water when beep, 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 beep. A deafening alarm rang out. Steam shot from a panel in the ceiling. The lights flickered. Max, the puppy, started barking furiously, running in circles. "What the?" Sophie shouted, shielding her ears. A few seconds later, footsteps pounded down the hallway. Ethan appeared in the doorway, shirtless, towel wrapped around his waist, hair dripping. "What did you do?" Sophie backed up, still startled. "I was just making coffee." "You triggered the house's security system. It's sensitive." "Sensitive? This thing reacts faster than a bomb squad." Ethan walked over to a panel on the wall, punched in a code, and the alarm stopped. The silence that followed was just as jarring. Sophie looked at the coffee maker. This was supposed to be coffee, not a chemical warfare test. Ethan blinked, then cracked a smile. You've got talent. In chaos. Thanks, Sophie replied, brushing hair from her eyes. I try. Just then Helen, the housekeeper, entered, her face a mix of confusion and annoyance. What in heaven's name happened here? Coffee, Sophie muttered. Helen stared at her, then at the stove. You're officially banned from this side of the kitchen. Despite everything, Sophie let out a laugh. So did Ethan. From that moment, the energy between them started to shift. Less guarded, more curious. Later, when Sophie offered to help around the house, Helen hesitated, then handed her a feather duster. Sophie cleaned the guest room, organised Max's toys, and even tried to wash his water bowl, though she spilled half of it on herself. In the garden, she met Andrew, the driver, sneaking a cigarette behind a tall hedge. Hey, he said, smirking. You're the fire alarm hero. More like the walking disaster, she grinned. Nah, you're the most excitement this place has seen in months. Sophie laughed, genuinely this time. Back inside, Ethan called her into his office. She stepped in, cautious. If this is about the coffee... No, he said, sitting down and opening a folder. It's about a job. A job? I want to hire you, he said plainly, to care for Max full-time while he recovers. 2 weeks. Includes housing, meals, a salary. Sophie blinked. You want to pay me to stay here and take care of the dog I already care about? That's the idea, Ethan said. She picked up the pen on the desk, but it didn't work. She shook it, blew on it. This pen's as dry as your sense of humour. I beg your pardon? Nothing, just thinking out loud. Eventually the pen worked. She signed the document with steady hands and pushed the paper back. Welcome to the team, Ethan said, offering a handshake. Sophie, just Sophie. He smirked. All right, just Sophie. She rolled her eyes but smiled anyway. Later that night, Sophie sat on the plush couch in the living room with Max curled in her lap. The TV was on, some reality cooking show, but she wasn't really watching. The house felt calm, almost too calm. Suddenly the front door opened. The click of heels echoed through the room before a sharp voice followed. Well, at least someone in here still has good taste. Sophie sat up straight. A tall, stunning woman with icy eyes and designer perfume walked in, straight toward Max. He growled. The woman froze, clearly surprised. Really? You forget me that easily? Seconds later, Ethan walked in. Natalie, he said, calm but clearly not thrilled. Oh, don't worry, she purred. I'm not here for drama, just came to talk. You shouldn't have come uninvited, Ethan replied coolly. Sophie tried to shrink into the background. Natalie's gaze shifted to her and the robe she wore. So this is the new hobby? Another stray you've decided to rescue? Sophie flinched. Watch your words, Ethan warned. Am I wrong? Natalie continued, folding her arms. You always did have a soft spot for broken things. She means more than any of your polished facades ever did, he said, voice low and firm. Natalie blinked. This isn't over. And with that she turned on her heels and left. The silence that followed was heavy. Sophie picked up Max and left the room, unsure if she belonged anymore. Upstairs she sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her backpack. She wrote a note. Thank you for everything. I'm sorry I listened too much. She folded it, left it on the desk and kissed Max on the head. You'll be okay, buddy. Then she walked out the door, just as the sun was beginning to rise. The morning light filtered softly through the mansion's large windows, casting long shadows on the marble floor. Ethan stirred from a restless sleep. Something felt off. He sat up, rubbed his eyes and walked toward the hallway. When he passed the guest room, he noticed the door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open. The bed was empty. The robe she'd worn was folded neatly on the chair. On the desk, a small folded piece of paper caught his eye. Ethan picked it up, unfolded it with fingers that trembled slightly. "Thank you for everything. I'm sorry for listening too much." His jaw clenched. Number without a word, he stormed out of the room and downstairs. Max barked sharply from the living room, picking up on his owner's sudden distress. Helen appeared at the foot of the stairs, hair in a loose bun, holding a mug of tea. "Something wrong?" "She left," Ethan said. "What do you mean left?" "She's gone." Helen didn't reply. She just set the mug down quietly. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his phone and called Andrew, his long-time driver. "I need you to find Sophie. Now." "Any idea where to start?" Andrew asked. "She once told me she used to sleep near a laundromat. 8th Avenue, that's all I've got." "I'm on it." The city was just beginning to wake up when Sophie curled up against the cold wall behind the laundromat. Her old blanket barely shielded her from the morning chill. Her body ached. She had barely eaten in 2 days. A tight cough escaped her throat, followed by a shiver that ran through her spine. Maybe it was just the cold, or maybe it was something worse. She clutched her backpack to her chest and closed her eyes. A few hours later, Andrew pulled the car to a stop nearby. He scanned the sidewalk, then saw a figure slumped behind a trash bin. It was her. "Sophie!" he shouted, rushing over. Her eyes fluttered open weakly. "Andrew? You've got a fever. We need to get you out of here." "No, I just wanted to sleep a little." "No sleeping," he said firmly. "Ethan's on his way." "He shouldn't have," she whispered. He insisted. Minutes later, Ethan's car pulled up. When he saw Sophie, thin, pale, barely conscious, something broke in his chest. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Sophie," he breathed. "I can walk," she murmured. "Don't be ridiculous," Ethan said softly. With ease, he picked her up in his arms. She rested her head against his chest, barely holding on. "I'm sorry I listened," she whispered. "Forget it, it's my fault," he said, carrying her toward the car. "You were angry. I was stupid." Ethan held her tightly like she might disappear again. Back at the mansion, Helen waited at the door. "The guest room's ready," she said automatically. "She's going to mine." Helen's eyebrows shot up. "What? You heard me." He carried Sophie up the stairs, past the staff's stunned expressions, into his own room. He laid her gently on his bed and pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. She was burning up. He grabbed a damp cloth and pressed it gently to her forehead. Helen stood in the doorway, watching silently. "You're doing all this for a girl you barely know," she said quietly. Ethan didn't look away from Sophie. "She saved Max." Helen nodded slowly. "And now it seems she's saving you too." A few days passed. Sophie's fever broke. She woke to soft morning light and the quiet warmth of Ethan's bed. Max lay beside her, head resting on her leg. She stroked his fur gently. "Hey, buddy." Helen brought in a tray with fruit and tea. "You look human again." Sophie smiled. "Thanks. I think that's as close to a compliment as you'll get from me," Helen said, walking out. Ethan came in a few minutes later looking tired but relieved. "You're better," he said. "Still tired, but I don't feel like I'm falling apart." "Small wins." She sat up slowly. "Can I get some air?" Ethan hesitated. "Only if Max goes with you." "Deal." She walked the garden slowly, the wind gentle against her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe again. That was when she heard a voice behind her. "Clara?" She froze. Sophie turned to see a woman in her 60s, grey hair, sunglasses, and a shocked expression on her face. I'm sorry," Sophie stammered. "It's you. It's really you," the woman said, stepping closer. "Clara Santiago. I worked in your father's house, in the kitchen. My God, after all that happened, no one knew where you'd gone." "I'm not that person anymore," Sophie said quickly. The woman's face softened. "I know it wasn't your fault. I always knew it was him, your father. He used you." Sophie's heart raced. "Please," she whispered. "Don't say this here, not now." The woman reached for her hand. "You can't keep running forever." Sophie pulled away. "My name is Sophie now, and I'm not ready." She turned and walked away. When she returned to the mansion, Ethan saw something was wrong. She went straight upstairs without speaking. Hours later, he knocked on her door. Sophie sat on the floor, hugging her knees. "I saw someone today," she said. "Someone who knows who I was." "Do you want to talk about it?" She nodded slowly, and then she told him everything. Her real name, Clara Santiago, the adopted daughter of a respected politician, the man who used her name on forged charity documents to hide illegal funds. When the truth came out, he blamed her. The media turned on her. Friends abandoned her. Her mother took her father's side. She had no one. So she ran, changed her name, became invisible. "I've never told anyone this," she said, tears falling. "But I trust you, and I was scared that if you knew, you'd see me like they did." Ethan moved closer, his expression unreadable. "I don't know who Clara was," he said gently, "but I know Sophie, and she's brave as hell." She laughed through the tears. "Don't say that. I don't feel brave." "You are." He offered his hand. "I don't know what's next," she said. "Then don't do it alone." And in that moment, Sophie realized for the first time in years, someone wasn't walking away from her story. He was stepping into it. The days that followed felt different, lighter. Sophie and Ethan still kept their distance in some ways, but there was an unspoken connection between them now, something that neither of them had the courage to name just yet. One morning, Sophie walked into the kitchen in an oversized sweatshirt, her hair tied up carelessly. "Smells like sabotage," she sniffed at the coffee on the counter. "I made it myself," Ethan said behind the newspaper. Sophie raised an eyebrow. "So it's a survival test?" "I figured if it didn't kill me, it might make me stronger." She chuckled and poured a cup anyway. Helen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Is this house a retreat center now?" "If it is," Sophie replied, "I'm not on dish duty." Ethan just watched them both from the corner of his eye, silently amused. That afternoon, Sophie took Max out for a walk around the garden. The sky was clear and the wind was warm. For once her heart felt light, until she heard it. Voices. Cameras. "There she is!" Sophie froze. Her heart dropped. Photographers, reporters, lights, the gate. Someone had tipped them off. Helen came rushing through the hallway. "They found out." "The press. They know you're here." Sophie's breath quickened. "What? How?" "Natalie," Helen spat. "She leaked it." And as if summoned by the sound of her name, the doorbell rang. There she was, Natalie, in full makeup with a polished smile and a smug man holding a microphone beside her. "Is Ethan home?" she called. "I brought someone very curious to meet your new guest." Sophie's legs felt like they would give out. Ethan arrived just as the tension peaked. He stepped in front of Sophie and looked directly at the cameras. "We're together," he said calmly. "She's my girlfriend." Silence. Sophie's eyes widened. "What did you say?" "I said we're together." The cameras exploded in flashes. Natalie's smile vanished. Sophie pulled Ethan aside. "You what?" "I had to protect you. By lying to the press." "I didn't lie. I'm your employee. Not anymore." The tension between them boiled over. "You didn't ask me. You just decided. Would you rather they invent worse headlines? Dig into your past?" Sophie didn't reply. "You had no right," she whispered. "I only did it because I care." She stared at him. "You don't even know me." "I know enough, and I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she snapped. Then Ethan did the one thing neither of them expected. He leaned in and kissed her. It was sudden, fierce, desperate, and real. Too real. When they pulled away, neither of them said a word. Sophie turned and walked away, her heart pounding. Upstairs, she leaned against the door, whispering to herself, why did that have to feel so good? The next day, Ethan was nowhere to be found. Helen set down breakfast without a word. He left early, meetings or something. Sophie nodded, but she felt the gap already forming between them. In the afternoon, Helen entered the room with her phone. We have a problem. What kind? You're in the news. Sophie took the phone. A collage of paparazzi images filled the screen. Her with Max in the garden, entering Ethan's car, descending the stairs in his robe. The headline screamed, "Who's the mystery woman living with billionaire Ethan Moore?" Her stomach turned. "There's more," Helen said grimly. Natalie came back. With a reporter. They're outside right now. Sophie froze. Ethan came home minutes later. "They know," she said, holding the phone up. "I figured they might," he replied. "And we need to act fast." He walked to his office, opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. "What's that?" "A contract." "For marriage," Sophie blinked. "I'm sorry, Baz. What?" "A civil marriage. 3 months, legal, controlled. It'll give us protection from media harassment from Natalie." "You want me to marry you?" "It's not romantic, it's tactical." She stared at him. "You're insane." "I know it sounds crazy, but it's safer than the alternative. And after 3 months, we divorce, quietly." Sophie sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. "What else is in the contract?" "No obligations, separate rooms, public appearances together, and a symbolic stipend." She took a deep breath. "This is madness." "It's survival," Ethan said. She signed, and with that, the most unusual wedding of the year was set. The next morning, the headline read, "Billionaire Ethan Moore marries woman who saved his dog and his heart." Sophie nearly choked on her coffee. "My heart!" she yelled, storming into Ethan's office. "Poetic license," he said, sipping tea. "This is a contract, not a Nicholas Sparks novel. Would you prefer I said it was just about Max?" "Maybe." Helen passed by and smirked. "You two are going to need a honeymoon." In the weeks that followed, something shifted. What began as an arrangement felt different. The tension eased. The walls softened. There were inside jokes, burnt toast, movie nights, small touches, shared silences. And then one night, during a thunderstorm, Sophie curled up in Ethan's reading chair with Max in her lap. "You okay?" Ethan asked, coming in damp from outside. "You're wet." "I checked the gate. The press is still there. And now they brought drones." "Welcome to chaos," she joked, pulling him inside. She dried his hair gently, her hands shaking slightly. "Why are you still here?" he whispered. "Because I don't want to run anymore. Even with all of this. Especially with all of this." He wrapped her in a blanket and sat across from her. "When my mom died," Ethan began quietly, "I promised I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me again. I kept that promise. Until you." Sophie bit her lip. "I don't know what we are, Ethan." "Me neither. But I don't want to lose this." She reached out. He took her hand. The thunder outside raged on. But in that quiet room, 2 storms finally found peace. The next morning the sky was clear, but Sophie felt a storm inside her chest. She was sipping tea in the garden when a voice from behind sent a chill down her spine. "Clara?" Sophie turned sharply. An older woman with grey hair and dark sunglasses stood just a few feet away, clutching a canvas shopping bag. "I'm sorry," Sophie said. "You've got the wrong person." "No, I don't." The woman took a shaky step forward. "It's me, Maggie. I used to work in your family's kitchen. Clara Santiago." Sophie's heart stopped. "I don't go by that name anymore." "I know, but I saw everything. I always knew it wasn't your fault. I knew it was him." Sophie's hands curled into fists. "Please, not here." "I tried to speak up back then," Maggie whispered. "But your father, he was too powerful." Sophie stepped back, shaken. "I'm not going through that again." "You can't run forever." "I already have a new life, a new name." Sophie tugged Max's leash and walked away fast, her steps unsteady. Back at the house, she stormed through the garden, cheeks flushed with anger and fear. Ethan was pruning flowers. He noticed her tension immediately. "Sophie." "I need time," she muttered, brushing past him. Ethan followed her quietly up the stairs, where he found her sitting on the floor, hugging her knees. "I ran into someone," she whispered. "She knew who I used to be." Ethan sat across from her. "Tell me." Her voice cracked. 2 years ago, I was Clara Santiago, the adopted daughter of a powerful politician, Samuel Santiago. He was adored publicly, but at home he was controlling. She looked up, eyes glistening. "He used my name to embezzle money, faked documents. I didn't know. But when the scandal broke, he blamed me. And people believed him. Everyone did. My friends, the media, even my mother." Her voice trembled. "They called me a thief, an ungrateful liar. So I ran, changed my name, lived on the street, sold candy to survive. That's how I found Max." Ethan didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't know Clara, but I know Sophie, and she's the strongest person I've ever met." She let out a laugh that was more like a sob. "You still want me here?" He reached for her hand. "You're not just here, you belong here." Tears ran down her cheeks. "Then they won't run anymore." The following morning, Ethan found a box by the front door. Inside, a photo of Sophie from her homeless days, thin, exhausted, holding Max under a blanket. On the back, a handwritten note. "Truths always surface." Sophie went pale. "It's Natalie," she said, voice shaking. "She's going to leak everything." Ethan held the photo carefully. "Then let her." "What?" "She can't hurt us if we stand in the open." That afternoon, Ethan called for a press conference. The room filled with reporters, cameras, flashing lights. Sophie stood beside him. Ethan took the stage with the photo in one hand and a brown envelope in the other. "I'm here today not as a CEO, but as a man who has found something worth protecting. There have been rumors about my wife's past. Some of them are true. But what's more true is that she was a victim, not a villain." He held up the envelope. "These are the documents proving Sophie was framed by her own family. She could have hidden this, but she chose honesty." Sophie felt the weight in her chest lighten. "She saved my dog. She saved me. And she showed me that being broken doesn't mean you're unworthy of love." Applause erupted. For the first time, the world didn't look at her with judgment, but with admiration. Back at the mansion, Helen placed a chocolate cake on the table with a note. "Congrats on defeating the past. Now admit the rest." Sophie laughed. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "She's talking about us," she said. Ethan turned serious. "The contract ends in a few days." "I know. And us?" Sophie stared at him. "I don't want this to end either." Ethan stepped closer. "Then let's make it real. No terms, no timelines, just us." Sophie whispered, "Yes." And with that, they chose each other, not out of obligation, but out of love. Weeks later, Sophie found a note on her pillow. "Meet me in the sunroom at 7 p.m. Wear something that feels like you." At 6:59, Sophie walked through the candlelit path in a soft blue dress. Ethan waited in the center. "When you came into my life, everything I thought I knew was turned upside down. You were messy, loud, unpredictable, and I fell in love with that." He knelt down and opened a small box. "I don't want to calculate anymore. I want surprises, chaos, mornings with burnt coffee and nights with shared silence. I want you." Sophie dropped to her knees beside him. "I've wanted to marry you before I even realized it." The wedding was simple, in the garden. Max wore a tiny tuxedo. Helen gave a speech that made everyone cry. And when Sophie and Ethan exchanged vows, no contract, no performance, just truth. Everyone knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The days after the wedding passed like a quiet dream. There were no reporters, no scandals, no more secrets. Just two people walking side by side, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Sophie woke up every morning with a sense of calm she had never known before. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She was living. Ethan had changed too. The cold, calculated CEO was now a man who smiled more often, who let Max climb into bed and snore next to him, who spent entire afternoons in the garden planting flowers just because Sophie liked them. One night, as they sat on the swing under the stars, Sophie looked up and said softly, "Do you ever think about how strange this all is? That a homeless woman and a billionaire could find each other in the middle of all this chaos?" Ethan tightened his grip on her hand. "Not strange," he said. "Just meant to be." Sophie smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. They didn't need promises anymore. They didn't need guarantees. They had already fought the battles that mattered. What remained was simply love, raw, honest, and real. And as Max curled up by their feet, the wind whispering softly through the garden, Sophie closed her eyes and knew she wasn't a mistake, she wasn't a burden, she wasn't a lost cause, she was chosen, and this time she had chosen back. What did you think of Sophie and Ethan's incredible journey? On a scale from 1 to 10, how much did this story touch your heart? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story reminded you that love can be found in the most unexpected places, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Moments of the Heart for more emotional stories just like this one. Click on the next video right here to dive into another tale that might just change how you see the world. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and always choose love. Love,